Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. So today's video is a pretty exciting video, not only for you but for me. I am super excited to film this review and give my thoughts on the one and only Jaclyn Hill palette in collaboration with Morphe. I am so happy to have this palette. I definitely have some thoughts and opinions on this palette, but before we get into my review of this palette, let's look at the swatches. So for the swatches, I actually used both my fingers and a brush, and for the brushes, I switched between 3 different brushes. So I first used the Sigma E55 eye shading brush, then I used this really old Sephora brush, the all over eyeshadow brush, and then I also used another Sephora brush, and this is from the mini collection, and I think it's just their basic eye shading brush. So they're all basically different versions of eye shading brushes, pretty much the same material. I will say that my swatches are not perfect. I really tried my best to do really accurate swatches. Now I will say that there were times where these brushes were a little bit wet from using like my makeup removing wipe. I tried to dry them as much as possible. I really wanted to try and use just one eyeshadow brush, but that was the best way that I could do it. I don't have one of those, what is it? Those little like things to clean your brushes that's dry, and I don't have the Cinema Secrets brush cleaner that makes your brushes dry really fast. So I worked with what I could. I couldn't make them as accurate as I possibly could, but I feel like these are still, really good swatches and are a good representation of what these shadows are. All right, so first of all, this is what the palette looks like. I think most of you know what this palette looks like. There are a ton of reviews on YouTube, and first of all, I wanted to mention that in this review, I'm not going to be repeating a ton of, in-depth stuff like ingredients, price per gram, stuff like that. If you want to look for that kind of information, Jen Loves Reviews did a review video on this palette, and she has a ton of great information about ingredients, price per gram, stuff like that, the nitty-gritty details. So go watch her video for that kind of information. But in this video, I'm just going to give you some of my thoughts on, me using this palette and just, in general, my experience with this palette, and not necessarily like the nitty-gritty numbers and stuff like that. This palette retails for $38 on morphebrushes.com. I did also order the 35O together in the same order. And unfortunately I didn't receive free shipping, but I know that shipping within the United States is a lot better than it is to ship outside of the United States. I've heard so many people from other countries complain about the shipping fees and stuff like that. So yeah, I definitely think the shipping is a little bit of a ripoff even in the United States, just in my opinion. And also getting these two palettes was my very first order from Morphe. I am obviously not an affiliate. I'm not really a big enough YouTuber to really get an affiliate. I've never owned any of their other products, their brushes, anything like that other than these two palettes. So these two palettes are my very first experience with Morphe, so it definitely was, kind of interesting to, get my first glimpse of this brand through this release, and then one of their most raved about palettes, which is the 35O, which I will kind of compare a little bit in this video. I haven't tried this palette out that much, but I, wanted to bring it out and kind of compare it just a little bit with this one. All right, so the material of the Jaclyn Hill palette is different than the regular Morphe palettes. This one is kind of a plastic, and this one is a white cardboard. So as you can see, it says the Jaclyn Hill palette on the front, and then on the back it has little JHs all around, and then Morphe X Jaclyn Hill. And this is what the palette looks like on the inside. It says here a little message up here. I really, wish there was a mirror there like most people have said, but I get that they wanted to make the palette, affordable and accessible for most people. So I think, it's okay that they don't have a mirror in this palette. Now, one thing that I do wish they had, packaging wise, was the names of all of these eyeshadows. Now, I did order my palette in July, so I ordered it in the first restock of this palette. I didn't get it in the original release. I got it in the first restock of this palette in July. And with my palette, I did not receive a little card that has the shade names, but they do have a little PDF of the shade names on the website. So that's kind of how I, figure out the shade names, or I just, watch other people's videos. But I did not receive a little card. If I did receive a little card with the shade names, I would have probably taped it up here like Raw Christy Beauty did, and Jen Loves Reviews. They both taped their little cards up here, and I feel like that would have been super handy. But you know what? The shadows, still work great without the shade names, but that would have been really, really a nice addition to this palette, especially since in her video, you can tell that she put a lot of thought into naming these eyeshadow shades. Now, a con that I have with the packaging is that since it is made out of cardboard, I really get nervous that it will get messy because it is the white. I really think the white packaging looks super sleek. I love the actual look of the silver and the white, but you know, it's gonna get dirty. I luckily haven't gotten it too dirty yet, but I still, you know, get nervous and I'm really careful with it. And also because it is the cardboard, I always get nervous when this knocks into like, you know, something else, you know, around me in my desk or something, because I don't want it to get dented or anything. You know, I know this is a limited edition coveted palette, so I don't want anything to happen to it in terms of, you know, ruining the packaging. But I mean, the way the packaging looks nice. I'm just hate that it's, you know, eventually going to get dirty and knocked up from using it. All right, so now let's actually get into the colors of this eyeshadow palette. Now, as you could see in the swatches, the finger swatches and the brush swatches were very different, and oddly enough, I feel like on the eyes, they sort of act in between those kinds of swatches. They definitely are not as good as the finger swatches, but they are not as bad as the brush swatches showed. I was so surprised at how badly the brush swatches were, but I honestly feel like on the eyes, these blend sort of in between those two swatches. So in terms of quality, they're sort of in between what the swatches showed, which comes to show that, you know, swatches don't always show the quality of eyeshadows, in my opinion. In terms of the formula is very much in between. It's not super powdery and super soft, and it's not, you know, super hard, obviously. Now, I feel like that certain colors definitely feel harder and not as soft as other ones. In particular, the mattes, I feel like, are the most pigmented and usually the softest eyeshadows compared to the more metallic-y ones, in my opinion. But honestly, in this palette, it's very inconsistent. I mean, there's some mattes that are super powdery, and there's some mattes that feel really hard to the touch, and vice versa with metallics. But overall, generally, I feel like the mattes are definitely more pigmented than the shimmers. I feel like with the shimmers and metallics, except for actually these two highlight shades, all of the other shimmers and metallics, I definitely feel like I need Fix Plus or water or something to make them more intense. So that's what really disappointed me the most about this palette, was that I really do need to use Fix Plus with the majority of the metallic and shimmery shades in this eyeshadow palette. In terms of the actual formula of these Morphe eyeshadows, I actually feel like both this palette and the Morphe 35O are actually really great shadows for beginners. They're sort of, like I said before, sort of in between. They're not too powdery, too pigmented, but they're not too hard and not pigmented. So I feel like in terms of that, they're really great. They're really great shadows for beginners, in my opinion. Now, it could be really overwhelming for a beginner because most of the Morphe shadows come with 35 eyeshadows. I mean, like, there's just so many colors to choose from. It's hard to kind of, you know, pick out what's a good transition, you know, for those who are just starting out. And in terms of the 35O, I feel like it makes it kind of harder, but almost easier, because I feel like in the 35O especially, this area, there's like 5 million browns, but that is a whole other video. The one con I do have with the formula is I feel like there are some shades in here that are harder to blend. I do feel like some of these transition-y colors, like here and along here, they are a little bit difficult to blend. I feel like, oddly enough, on this eye, it's always a little bit harder for me to blend out eyeshadows, so I think it just kind of depends on your eye shape. But for me, I feel like some of these transition colors, like up here, are a little bit harder to blend for me than some of the other mattes. Maybe it's just the brushes I'm using and my eye shape or something, but just in my personal opinion, they're a little bit harder to blend. And then the other thing that's interesting about these transition colors, in my opinion, is that I feel like you really need not just one transition color. I feel like this, since there's so many warm matte colors, it's actually, the look will look a lot better and blend a lot better when you either layer the same transition color or add more transition colors. So let me explain this. So for example, if you use like one of these two first, you apply that first and blend it out in the crease. I think it looks so much better and blends a lot better if you either layer the same color or if you add like one of these as kind of like a second transition color. I think that's what makes, you know, the looks in this palette look a lot better, and also just makes things blend a lot better, and it also adds a little bit more dimension and uniqueness to the look. So I definitely feel like, since you have so many options, using just one transition color is not going to necessarily work for most looks. Now, in terms of the color selection, I actually feel like the color selection was super smart. I love the idea of having all of these neutral colors plus these pops of color. Honestly, this palette got me with this little corner over here. All of these cool pops of colors are what me really want to get this palette, because I feel like they're super, I mean, they're not you know, they're not super unique, but I feel like they're fairly unique in the eyeshadow market. So this little corner of here was made me just go like, oh my gosh, I need this palette. I love those cool blues and purples. I really, really like those colors, and I like that there's, you know, a bunch of neutrals to mix with it as well. So I feel like overall the color selection is super smart for the majority of people. Now, even though I really think the color selection was smart, I think there could be, you know, some changes. Now, first of all, the one big con of this eyeshadow palette is I wish there was a light matte brow bone shade. That is the one thing this palette is missing. I always really like a matte skin tone colored eyeshadow to put by my brow bone or even set my eye primer, and this palette is missing it, which makes me really mad and makes me wonder, like Jaclyn Hill, you know, she's a YouTuber, makeup artist. You would think that she would use kind of a matte skin tone color, you know, in a lot of her eyeshadow looks, but she doesn't include this in this palette. Like, I wish one of these two highlight shades was matte, and that would really, you know, make this a full complete palette for me. I feel like I have to take out my Urban Decay Naked Basics to, you know, use a matte, like, cream skin tone shade. Also, the other thing in terms of this color selection is I wish there were more cooler shades and more lighter shades. Most of these colors are warm, which, you know, that's Jaclyn's thing. She definitely likes a lot more warmer toned shadows. But in my opinion, I wish there were a few cooler transition shades, especially for some of these like more cooler toned colors. And some of these colors down here, I feel like some cooler transition colors would go better with these than some of these warmer transition colors. And also a lot of these mattes are super dark and super pigmented. I love like this shade Hunts and this shade Jax. Those eyeshadows, those matte eyeshadows are beautiful. They are so pigmented and I really like them, but there are some of these shades, like these transition shades, they show up a little bit darker than I thought. So I wish, you know, some of these were a little bit lighter and a little bit more subtle. And again, I'm pretty sure that's not Jaclyn's thing, but I feel like in terms for it to fit with everybody, I wish some of these shades were a little bit more on the cooler side. Not all of them. I definitely think the warmer colors, they're great. But for me personally, for it to be like an all-purpose eyeshadow palette for me on a daily basis, I wish there were more cooler colors, especially in the transition eyeshadow area, and for some of the colors to be a little bit lighter and not as red. There's so many different reds in this palette, they're all gorgeous, but there's just so many, like, I don't know, I just feel like there's so much red and so much orange, and those are colors that I typically don't go for all the time. I know those are the super popular colors right now, but I feel like I don't always use those colors, and those colors don't necessarily look the best on me all the time. Now, maybe the reason that I wish there were some cooler, lighter colors is because of my skin tone. I feel like the majority of these colors would work super well on sort of the light, medium skin tones, kind of like what Jaclyn is, and I think a lot of these would work, you know, on dark skin tone people, but I mean, some of these colors just do not work on my fair, cool skin tone. I just feel like, you know, a lot of these are very, very warm. Now, again, to some other things that I really do like about this palette is these eyeshadows last a long time. I have worn some of these eyeshadows and tested out some of these eyeshadows for, you know, a very long day, and I feel like they look exactly the same on the eyes as they do when I first apply it, which I think is really, really nice considering the price of this palette and considering the quality is honestly not my favorite eyeshadow formula. These eyeshadows last forever on my eyes, and that is one of my favorite things about this eyeshadow palette. And also, I feel like with this eyeshadow palette you can create a ton of different unique looks. Now, I mean, I feel like definitely, you know, some of the reds and oranges, they're not unique. Warm eyeshadow palettes have been around, you know, they're very trendy, and there have been a lot that have been released lately in the past couple years, but I feel like including these pops of colors and like especially these greens like Diva and Enchanted, they can create some really unique looks that I've never seen before. Especially, I love the Diva and Enchanted combination. I have worn that before and I really, really like it. Now, considering that, I feel like this palette is not very day friendly. Now, I definitely think you can create some nice neutral looks for the daytime or for work, but I feel like this palette really shines in terms of super smoky colorful looks, super warm looks that are sometimes a little bit too bright and pigmented on a day-to-day basis or for work or for school, whatever. I mean, look at my eyeshadow look today. It is just super pigmented, super bright and in your face, and I feel like that's kind of what this palette is. It's for super showy, you know, Instagram, YouTube looks. It's not necessarily for the everyday person going to work or school, even though you can do looks like that with this palette, but I definitely think it shines, you know, doing more Instagram poppy looks. Now, speaking of this eyeshadow look that I have on today, this actually was inspired by a tutorial by Kathleen Lights, which I'll leave down in the description box below. I just wanted to try out this look. I didn't know if it really would, you know, go with my whole outfit today and whatever, but I thought I would try it. And that's the thing, is I feel like there's so many awesome tutorials out there on YouTube with this palette, and I honestly wasn't really thinking about getting this palette, but I just saw so many cool, awesome, colorful tutorials with this palette that kind of made me want to get this palette. I definitely feel like that even though some of these shadows aren't unique, it's definitely unique enough where it made me want to get this palette, and I feel like you can create some super unique looks, like I said before. Now, I really wanted to test this Jaclyn Hill palette. I have worn a ton of these eyeshadows. I still haven't worn every eyeshadow in this palette, but I feel like, you know, I have tried enough of these eyeshadows to have a good grasp of what this palette is. So I thought I would also get the Morphe 35O palette to sort of compare a little bit. Now, to be quite honest, I've only tried the 35O once because I've been testing out this palette so much, but I do feel like that the quality of this one is honestly not that much different than the typical Morphe eyeshadow palettes. Now, I do feel like this one is a little bit better. I just feel like the shade selection is a lot better. The quality is like slightly better, but I feel like it actually lasts a lot longer than, like, for example, the 35O, but I definitely feel like, you know, the quality overall is not that much different than the 35O that I've tried. Now, just to get a comparison, these are kind of hard to hold. These are what the colors, you know, look like next to each other. There are definitely, I don't know if you can hear me, but there are definitely some colors in the Jaclyn Hill palette that are very similar to the 35O. Especially, you know, a lot of these oranges and reds. So if you have the 35O, you might not need this palette, but I actually think this palette is a little bit better than this one, in my opinion, just because there are some other colors other than the reds and oranges, which, I mean, I like, you know, once in a while, but honestly, it just doesn't fit with me and my skin tone all the time. And also, I just feel like, in particular in the 35O, there's just so many browns and so many of the same color, where I feel like in the Jaclyn Hill palette, each color is a little bit more unique. If you would like to see a separate video of me comparing these two palettes, or just, you know, a palette reviewing the 35O on its own, let me know down in the comments down below, or I might have a poll up here. I just haven't tested this palette enough yet to really give a concise comparison and a full review on this, because I've only used this palette once with a few of the shades in here. Now, in today's video, I really wanted to, you know, try a look from a tutorial that I saw on YouTube, but if you want to see me using this palette, you know, with my own tutorial and my own look, let me know again down in the comments down below. I'll be happy to do that. I was thinking about doing a demo, but because I wanted to try some looks from other YouTubers, I didn't do that, but I will be happy to do that. I've created some really, you know, pretty looks using this palette. Now, I'm just going to talk about the few of the shades in particular that have really kind of stood out to me, whether they've been good or bad. One of the first eyeshadows that really kind of surprised me and made me go like, whoa, this palette is so much better than I thought, was this color. And this color is called Jax, and it is just, I don't know, it's just such a pretty, like, super pigmented kind of dark apple, like, red color. It's interesting because in the swatches it doesn't look as red, which is really odd, but definitely on the eyes it is very red. It definitely is a little bit hard to blend, but on the eyes it looks super gorgeous in the crease / in the outer corner. It is so gorgeous. And the same story goes for this color Hunts. I know that a lot of people have been raving about that color, and for good reason. It's very similar to me, in my opinion, as Jax, where it's just super bright and intense, a little bit hard to blend, I will say, but it's definitely definitely a standout shade for me. Also, these highlighter colors, both of, I mean, I definitely could live without one, but both of them are equally really amazing. There was one day where I forget which one of the colors I had, but I had them in my inner corner, and I felt like it lasted for so long. I feel like with most inner corner highlight shades, that's the one eyeshadow I feel like does not last long on me, but with these two, they last forever in my inner corner. I was super impressed, and they're both super shimmery colors. I mean, I definitely don't need both of them, but they're both really nice. Now, one shade I was super shocked by was this color, and I think this color is Faint. I wore it once, and I was honestly not expecting a super great quality eyeshadow. I feel like I saw a swatch or something, or someone's review where they didn't really care for this shade, but I actually put it in my eyes and really enjoyed it a lot. Also, I really like these two colors, but the only thing is I definitely feel like I need Fix Plus. I was super disappointed with these two shades. This one is Obsessed and this one is Smoky but Natural. I was really disappointed with those two shades, but I feel like in terms of just looking at this palette, those are the two shades I would gravitate towards the most, but I definitely feel like I need Fix Plus with them, which is really heartbreaking to me. I wish they were more pigmented, because this Obsessed shade, like, I totally would be obsessed with if it were just more pigmented. Also, like I said before, I really do love Diva and Enchanted. They're a great combo, and I think that's, again, super unique colors in this palette and a super unique combo to this palette and to a lot of eyeshadows that I've seen. I have not tried Pool Party yet, which I think is odd because I feel like that is a shade that a lot of people love, but I am desperately waiting to try that shade out. But I have tried Jada. I actually used Jada on the lower lash line, and that looked really pretty. Also, I have brown eyes, so I just feel like bluish, purplish shadows look really good on me, and that is a really great lower lash line color. Also, another color that I really liked is Chip. That's a really great kind of outer corner color. I really like that it is a little bit more cool toned than some of the other browns in this eyeshadow palette. I also really liked Queen. I feel like it needs a little bit less Fix Plus than some of the other shimmers in this palette. And then one other eyeshadow that I really didn't like was this 24/7. Now, I think Jaclyn did say herself that it wasn't super pigmented, and then a lot of people would struggle with that shade, and I definitely get why. Now, it definitely, I feel like, looks really nice in a finger swatch, but I feel like that is the one brush swatch where I feel like it's accurate to how you apply it on the eyes. I need to figure out a way to work with that shadow because it's pretty on its own, but I just feel like when I applied it, it was just sort of a dud in my opinion. In terms of transition colors, the colors I've been using a ton have been this one. I forget what this one is called, and then I've also been using that one a lot. I think this one is the one that's called Butter, or maybe it's Pukey, I forget, but Butter and Pukey are both really good. I do feel like with the majority of these mattes, they're a little bit hard to blend, but they're not, you know, they're definitely not the worst thing to blend ever. Now, for my overall thoughts on this eyeshadow palette, I definitely am really happy I purchased this. I really didn't have super high hopes. I know a lot of people have been raving about it, but I don't know, I had my suspicions, especially with Morphe, and I've never purchased from them, but I've obviously heard, you know, some shady things about them, but I'm honestly super happy I got this palette. I was kind of debating. I wasn't sure if I was going to get it, but I'm really happy I got it. Now, is this my favorite eyeshadow formula ever? No, I definitely have some formulas that I like a lot better, but for the price, I definitely think this is a really nice quality eyeshadow palette, and I really enjoy the colors in this palette. I really have been enjoying testing out and using this eyeshadow palette, so I am overall really happy that I have this palette, glad I got my hands in it, and I'll definitely be using it, but I probably won't be using it too much because I feel like this palette is sort of not a legend, but I feel like it's sort of been a long time waiting for this eyeshadow palette. For 2 years, that's definitely a long time. This palette isn't perfect considering that it's been talked about for 2 years, but I definitely feel like it lives to the hype overall, in my opinion. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed this review and that it was helpful to you and gave you some things that you've never thought about in terms of this palette, since there are just so many reviews out there. But anyways, if you guys did enjoy this video, go ahead and give it a thumbs up down below. And if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe down below, or I'll have a subscribe button on my face at the end card at the end of this video. And also, I'm on Twitter and Instagram, so go follow me on those sites. I will have, again, links for those down in the description box below. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.